Thanks for checking out this horror debate series video. Once again, how this works, if you're new to this series, you're going to watch this video all the way through, get my explanation for my choice of the best horror comic book, in my personal opinion, and then go to Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel, which is linked in my description. Watch his video of the same title, get his pick, get his, all his reasoning for that. Then you can come back to my page if you want to. You don't have to. Go to the community tab and vote on who you thought had the best argument for which one they picked. And yeah, I mean, you can also comment on both of our videos. We highly encourage that. We love engagement with this. And I think people have been, enjoying it enough. I am going to say off the top of the bat, right off the bat, I feel like I might be at a bit of a disadvantage. I've read an okay amount of horror comic books, but I also know that Uncle Pete is much bigger into comic books than I am, so there is a possibility that he's read a lot more than me, so he has a lot more to pull from. But I went with a very good pick, one that has been my favorite horror comic for quite some time, but it also kind of mixes genres slightly, but that is the comic Nailbiter. If you're not familiar with this comic and you like horror stuff, also if you like true crime, because this puts in some true crime for sure, this would be a great one for you to read. It was started in, I believe, 2014. It's done by, didn't have the full name. Joshua Williamson did the story, art by Mike Henderson, colors by Adam Gazowski, letters and book design by John J. Hill, edited by Rob Levin. And it was created by Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson, just if you want to know that. So the amount of issues, I don't buy single issues, so I have the full series, which was 6 of these volumes, as well as there were 2 more volumes of Nailbiter Returns. I don't really recommend Nailbiter Returns so much. I think the original run, just Nailbiter, was phenomenal. Nailbiter Returns, okay-ish, but in comparison to the original run of Nailbiter, not even close. This is so good. Basically, the story on this one is a serial killer known as Nailbiter. That's what he's known as because he would chew the nails and actually the ends of the fingers off of his victims. Has gotten out of jail on a technicality. Simultaneously, he's going back home. Simultaneously, there's a detective who's looking into the fact that there have been, I believe, 16 serial killers that have all come from the same town in Oregon, and trying to figure out why is that. He's also trying to find his partner who went missing when he was looking for the same information. And it's all about this little bit of police procedural, a little bit of true crime, actually a lot of bit of true crime, because you get a lot of information on the other serial killers as well as Nailbiter. Nailbiter is actually a character who gets involved in what's going on here, and you won't know where things are going. And that's one of the greatest things about this comic book. You will not know where things are going, and they do such a good job of building suspense and making you want to stick with it, making you want to keep turning those pages, getting the next issue, next volume, however you collect, and all that jazz. But this is amazing. So I'm going to go into it a little bit more. The concept is very compelling, and the execution of the story does that concept justice. There are so many times with comic books, even horror comic books, but all comic books really, where you read it and you're like, yes, this is such a great concept, but they didn't execute it that well. Or they executed it well for a little bit, and then it just petered out, and they finished it horribly. I was reading one, Undiscovered Country, started really well, went for many issues, really, really good, and then it started really petering out, so I just kind of quit on it. Nailbiter, good all the way through, very good all the way through, so that's one of the big things. The story is super good, super compelling, and if you, from the description you heard me give of what the story is, if that sounded intriguing to you, you must read this. The artwork is quite good. I'll show you a little, sample of the artwork. Artwork's a little bit different from comic to comic, so for some people, they're very specific about what they do and don't like, style-wise, but I think for me, the style on this is pretty solid. I like it. There's really not a problem for me with it. They lay out the paneling in a pretty, I don't want to say pretty straightforward because it makes it sound kind of dull, but in a manner that's not confusing. There have been some comics kind of recently that the paneling is laid out in a bit of a confusing way. That's not a problem with this one, so that's great. So the artwork's great and all that. Pacing. The pacing's really good. There is a tendency for comics, plenty that I've read, especially recently, to just get a little extra wordy just for the sake of filling pages. It's kind of like filler in movies, and you can kind of tell when they're doing that. They're having like more dialogue between characters than they really need. It's not really going anywhere. It doesn't really add anything to the story. That's not the case with this. When they're not in an action sequence or giving you, gory, messed up details about what's gone on in the past or what's going on currently, they're building characters and they're building relationships between characters. They're using the panels on the page wisely, and they're doing a great job with it. It plays to the horror and true crime crowds at the same time. So like I said, if you're into horror, this is great for you. If you're into true crime, this is great for you. If you're into both of those things, it's super great for you because you're getting a very good amount of both of those things. One of the other things is some people may be like, oh, that sounds really interesting. 16 serial killers from the same town. You actually get information on all of the serial killers throughout the entire series. They will give you a little bit of backstory on each of them. Not only just, okay, this guy, was the dude's name, he killed people, but they all have different MOs, how they like to dress, how they, killed people, how they, did things during and afterwards, all their murders, all that stuff. So they all have their own serial killer personalities. It's not just this person killed, this person killed, this person killed, and they're all the same. They're all very different. So when you're introduced to these characters, it's very interesting. And also, they do some stuff with those characters that is super interesting with the storyline. The issues end with very interesting cliffhangers that make you want to keep reading. Like I said, it's a big time page turner, or at least was for me. I was hungry to know what was going on with this, and each time I was getting too tired to keep reading and I was about to go to bed, I was just like, oh, I need to go to bed, but man, I just want to keep going with this. I'm sure everyone's kind of felt that way with a comic book or a book, where it's such a good page turner that you're just like, I need to go do something else, or I need to go to sleep, or whatever. But you're like, but I just don't want to. This is all I want to do right now. And Nailbiter really did that for me, and I know it really could do that for a lot of other people. So some of you, I may be, preaching to the choir on this because you've already read it and you loved it. Some people, you may have read it and you're like, I think you're kind of overblown this. And some people, probably the majority of people, I would think, have not read this and are thinking, should I or shouldn't I? I would say yes, for sure. The other thing is, it actually has a decent amount of action and gore that's baked into it. It's not all like procedural. It's not all just like true crimey and stuff. Like, they show you a lot of stuff that's going on. Lots of gore. If you're easily disturbed by that type of stuff, maybe this is not the comic book for you, because it is pretty graphic in plenty of areas. So just know that. So disclaimer on that one. But yeah, I feel like those are all the great things I have to say about Nailbiter. Like I said, I obviously highly, highly recommend the original run, which is the 6 volumes, or I don't know how many issues that is. I think it's like 6 issues per volume, I think. So I think it was like 36, if I'm right on that. And I don't recommend Nailbiter Returns as much, unless you really just want to revisit the characters, like certain characters that are held over for that. In which case, if it's kind of like a nostalgia thing, like, oh, I love Nailbiter so much that I'd love to read Nailbiter Returns. Like, I get that. That's kind of how it was for me, even though I was like, I don't really think this is going to be that great, and I didn't think it was that great, but there's a little bit of interesting stuff. I think they kind of went off the rails with some stuff, but this one never goes off the rails. There are so many, like, oh my gosh moments in this one that it's totally worth it. So much payoff with this book. But I know this may be hard for some people as far as voting goes, so you don't necessarily have to vote just if you feel like voting. Because some people out there, you may not have read this. You may have no idea about this. And, what I told you is not enough. You'd have to read it for yourself. But anyway, again, if you haven't watched Uncle Pete's video, go to his channel, which is linked in my description. Give thumbs ups, the likes to both our videos. Subscribe to both our channels if you haven't. Hit the notification bell button to our channels if you haven't. Leave comments because we're loving that engagement. And like I've said before, you can leave the same comment. If you just want to like copy and paste so you don't want to rewrite, you can do that too. That's totally fine because we don't, we don't read each other's comments. We kind of read them separately, so it's all good. But thank you so much for sticking with this series if you've been with us. If you haven't been and this is your first one, welcome. It's been a lot of fun. You never know what topic we're going to cover next because I feel like this one was a little bit of a curveball, but we're having fun. Hopefully other people are having fun. I've heard from a decent amount of people that they are. But regardless, thank you for checking this out. Thank you for checking out this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.